This is an apple that I picked up from a shop about a 3-minute cycle from my flat in London. I wasn't actually going to the shop to get an apple. I just saw one and thought, oh, an apple. That sounds nice. When I went to Chicago, one of America's biggest, most walkable cities, buying a piece of fruit proved much more difficult. And what was weirder than the fact that I struggled to find one was what happened when I pointed this out online. Some claimed I made it up. My channel is full of lies. Fruit is definitely in downtown Chicago. Others claimed, well, of course there's no fruit in Chicago, or in America, anywhere. Well, how does that make sense? Which is it? The interesting part was how many people thought it was strange that I expected fruit to be easy to find in the first place. Apparently, fruit is something you bring from home, or you buy it from the grocery store. That's just the way it is. Then one person suggested a solution so bleakly American, it accidentally explains half of the video. The fruit bit isn't the interesting aspect of this story. Every culture has things that it treats as normal or the default. The interesting part is how quickly people defend the version of normal that they grew up with, even when that version makes everyday life slightly worse. I've looked through all the comments. Nobody was really arguing about fruit at the end of the day. They were arguing for the way things are. And I started wondering, what does it actually take for someone to question something they've never had to question before? My name is Edinger, and it turns out an apple is a pretty good window into why American and European cities feel so different to live in. So starting off, we've got a few different categories for the reasons Chicagoans gave to why downtown Chicago has no fruit. 1, it does have fruit. You just have to know where to find it. 2, well, it doesn't have fruit because people bring the fruit from home. And 3, of course Chicago doesn't have fruit, and that's not a problem. So we'll start on that one because it seems to be in a bit of double denial. As a Midwesterner, we really do just go to the store. It's not that big of a deal for us. Like, homie, I don't care where you are in England. It really doesn't matter. You have a port bringing in fresh produce from outside the country, less than a day's drive away. A drive? Okay. We don't. It's like almost asking why it's so hard to find fresh fruit in Moscow. It's nowhere near an international port. You hear that, people living in Moscow? This American thinks you don't have access to fruit. Because, that's what they teach us in American high school, about the Cold War. But then they never actually teach us anything after that because it stops having to do with America. Why would we teach them that? This has the same logic as in Midwest, we really do just walk on the road and share it with cars when we have to. Some of us die, but not that big a deal for us. And yeah, I guess the only reason that I, living in London, have any access to fresh produce like this is because I live near an international port. Otherwise, there's really no other way that fruit can be transported internationally or domestically. I'd live in a fruit desert like downtown Chicago. But then again, Chicago famously has quite a beautiful waterfront. And in fact, if you look at this map of the top apple producing regions in the USA, you might see that the entire region right across the lake from Chicago is one of the top producers of apples in the entire country. Well, the thing is, Chicago's not an international port, so that's the reason they can't get any. This genre of comment is the first we're looking at where the person does not take the time to think or process the problem that's being presented before already ascribing a reason that's completely unrelated. As I talked about in my recent video about the World Cup Stadium in New Jersey, a lot of Americans recently have stopped acknowledging problems to then actively learn and seek a solution, and instead stuck with acknowledging the problems and then making up reasons or excuses for why the problems must always remain. We can improve this situation. Chicago isn't an international port. That has to do with it, totally. It's almost the default position now to accept problems and explain them away with excuses rather than attempt to learn on how we can improve things. But also in this category, we have, well, there is a lack of fruits, but it's not a problem at all. You see, swallow a multivitamin pill. Fruit's not an item that has been all that popular. So the lack of fruit isn't an issue. Just eat a multivitamin. I'm sorry, I never thought of that. I guess rather than eat healthy food, I could just eat a lot of unhealthy food and then pop a vitamin and everything works out. That's how nutrition works, right? Clearly the current model in Chicago doesn't need to be thought about anymore. Just take a pill, take another pill, and that'll improve your diet. That's how it works. Or my favorite genre of American comment when a problem is pointed out, just make up a stat that makes you feel better rather than think about the problem that's being presented and how to fix it. This man went to the Loop, which is downtown Chicago, and said there's no fruits when there are dozens of 7-Elevens scattered around and all sell fruit and prepared fruit salads. We eat more fruit and veg per capita a year than most European countries. A citation needed? Well, on the first point, I did mention in the very video, and many comments did too, that though you might find fruit in 7-Eleven convenience stores or gas stations, the quality is surprisingly awful. Or maybe unsurprisingly awful, and there just weren't any along my route. On the second point though, whose source was probably just, trust me bro, I found a study from 2008, long time ago, but its report concludes that the results of the study support their hypothesis that the French tend to eat fruits and vegetables more often than Americans. And I found a much more recent report by the US Department of Agriculture that found that Americans are eating a lot less fruit than they were 20 years ago, with the percent of Americans eating little to no fruit jumping to 40%, as in 40% of Americans are eating little to no fruit every day. And I will say, as someone who grew up there, I completely understand why, because that was me when I lived there. I'd literally never eat fruit. There was something in the American ethos that I grew up with that was like, yeah, why would we need fruits? We've got lots of cool stuff. Fruits are like just lame, they're unprocessed. Why not have a fruit Pop-Tart? I wish I were joking. It's not that fruit isn't available. Heck, I could always probably grab some at the grocery store like everyone keeps saying, but that's not the reason why. It's just not prioritized as a culture. But regardless, there's no reason to make up stats to support your belief in the status quo rather than just doing a quick Google search and maybe trying to learn something. In the USA, anytime you see a commercial for a sugary cereal or a Pop-Tart, the ad will always include part of a balanced breakfast.
They're a tasty part of this balanced breakfast.
The chocolatey part of this good breakfast.
A delicious part of this complete breakfast.
A nice part of a balanced breakfast.
Because the thing being advertised really isn't good for you, but if you also have healthy things added to it, then it's not so bad in a balance. So essentially, literally anything can be part of a balanced breakfast. The sentence is just there to make you link their product with a healthy choice, even though it's not in the slightest. In the early 2000s, or as they call it here, the noughties, Britain also had quite a problem on its hands with nutrition. In 2001, only 24% of Britons were consuming the recommended amount of fruits or vegetables. So the Department of Health launched the 5-a-day campaign, encouraging Brits to eat at least 5 servings of fruits or vegetables a day. And by 2022, the number of Brits consuming the recommended amount increased to 34%. Sounds like a useful campaign, right? Meanwhile, though, the percent of Brits still not consuming a single serving was at 11%, in contrast to the US's whopping 40%. But the UK didn't invent the part of your 5-a-day campaign. It sounds like a really good marketing strategy, and I'm glad it worked over here. But the thing is, the UK saw a certain place try it out, and they wanted to try it themselves. So they learned from what another country was doing. What was the other country? Oh, actually, that was the USA. The whole program actually started in California. California launched the campaign in 1988, and then 3 years later, the National Cancer Institute took on the campaign and made it national. Well, what became of it? Well, it was quietly ended in 2007 after it was found to have no impact on Americans' eating habits. Oh, so if you want to know why this campaign worked really well in the UK but failed miserably in the US, despite the US having a lead, it's probably because you don't quite understand the difference in how each country's systems work. Let me explain. So even though the governmental body set these goals of health, the way that the US system works is that then the industry bodies are meant to carry it all out. And the industry body, co-created to do exactly that in the US's case, was the Produce for Better Health Foundation, which was a coalition of 76 companies representing produce growers, shippers, supermarkets, retailers, and such. A public health campaign delivered by people who profit when you buy more fruit. Seeing any problem with that? Because somehow, even when it comes to public health, this is again driven by profit motives, which that's how the US works even. I was like, can you believe it? Even when it comes to public health, America seems to prioritize profit. And every American's looking at the comments like, well, duh. So the US has like a national health body and they go, you know what? This is a good idea. We should encourage people to eat more fruit. And then rather than having any funding or getting investment and getting that involved, they go, let's let the companies dictate that. Hey, you'll make more money by selling fruits. And the companies go, oh, okay, that sounds good. And they try it out. But it wasn't as profitable. The UK system managed to work better because the public health message was delivered by a public health body. Turns out that lands differently than one delivered by the people selling you the product. Guys, drinking milk is really healthy, paid for by the Milk Foundation. I think Americans are just so used to being lied to on television and the radio, just because the laws that are supposed to protect them are pretty much non-existent at this point. The consumer rights laws are all loopholed, and there's all these lawyers trying to be like, well, you see, even though it's 100% sugar, it's still less than a gram of sugar, so we can get away with saying it's sugar-free. And Americans just have to kind of like dodge these lies all the time, and it's hard to predict. I think just a genuine distrust and lack of good information or trust in the system, because the system is shit, is probably a big reason why it didn't work in the US compared to the UK. But for a good example of something very similar, this is an image from the fridges at Google's offices in San Francisco. I've actually seen the ones in London, and they're just like this. Do you notice anything interesting? Well, the options immediately visible are drinks like water and flavored water. But hiding behind this opaque section, well, those are the unhealthy drinks. They're still available for employees to choose, but they're not as in their face and prioritized to help employees choose healthier options than drinking liquid sugar. The freedom is still there. You have the freedom. It's just you're being helped to make good decisions. The inverse of this fridge was pretty much my entire experience looking for healthy food in Chicago. But hey, according to many viewers, not only is that okay, it just makes business sense. Fruits are not profitable. It's less profit for the donut shop. All right, so fruits go bad. Donuts don't, right? How many of you go to a donut shop and you're okay with donuts from 2 days prior? Not many of you, I assume, right? I'd argue that the shelf life of apples and bananas is way more than donuts, but hey, we all know this is not a real argument that this person thought about at all. It was just the first excuse that came to mind to avoid thinking critically about the issues with the current system they don't want to think about. Yes, we must always put the profit of businesses above anything else. Do you not sometimes just like, I don't know, just think a little bit, just step out a little bit, just read what you've just written and go, why do I care so much about the profit of businesses over my own health? Why do I care about the profit of businesses over anything else? If every single decision day in and day out is always prioritizing business profits rather than humankind, quality of life, anything like that, if we always let money and profits dictate every single design choice, then the city stops being built around what people actually need and starts being built around what's easiest to sell them. Which would you rather live in? Oh, sorry, we have, why are you going to a restaurant and not a grocery store? That sounds like a skill issue on your part, my dude. Well, just to clarify here, because many comments like this popular one seem to think that it was insane of me to expect a restaurant to serve fruits or vegetables. I wasn't just looking for adding an apple or a banana to my meal, which would have been nice, and it is something very standard I can get in Europe a lot of times, and I swear it's also way more common in the diners in New Jersey. Sure, you can get a pie, you can get any sort of thing at the diner you want, but you can also get fresh fruit in a fruit bowl, right? That's kind of standard, right? Am I making this up? But I was bringing this up because there wasn't a single dish at the restaurant that I went to that had any fruit or vegetable involved at all. As in, no side of greens, not even a fruity compote, and I was just really surprised by this. This was my reverse culture shock. But I guess the American meta in Chicago, which must not be questioned, is that fruit is not meant to be at restaurants, and it is not meant to be available in the city. Rather than thinking critically, like, why is it fruits are only available at the grocery store here? You instead default to, the way things are the way things are meant to be. A little nugget of American exceptionalism that even carries through to fruit. Plus, if we think about this for just one more second, if you have a dense population center where most people are located during the day, why would you think it's more sensible and efficient to have things that those people would want further away from where everyone already is? Why would you think that it makes more sense to have all those people constantly have to leave where everybody is, where everything is, to get specific things? It's almost like forcing yourself to have a bad version of a video game where it's like just constant chase and follow quests, when you can literally just be like, oh, sweet, I can do this here, I can do this here. No, you have to go all the way over there for food. Oh no, you have to go all the way there for this. You know that doesn't make sense, right? You know that's because of the zoning laws, and that's not a default in everywhere else. That's just because of the US's broken system. That's how it works. The reason being, I think, is that culturally, a lot of these Americans are viewing cities like Chicago not as functional cities, which they might not have as much experience with, but instead viewing them similarly to their suburban car-centric areas they currently live in, where everything is far away, as that's the way it's designed. And so they ascribe that same design to a city where it just does not make sense. But that would also involve thinking about the system, which, like I said, is not a default many people do. Why would you? There's a lot going on, right? But case in point, the next genre of comment on this video. Because this point came up time and time again, despite me literally bringing it up in the video that people are commenting on, that you shouldn't have to bring fruit from home or from the grocery store, right? Like, can we all at least admit that making it so fruits aren't readily available in the city center results in fewer fruits being eaten? Like, that's logical, right? Rather than claiming fruits aren't available in the city because, quote, people have to get to work on time. Well, that's the same argument that the employee gave me in Chicago. Chicagoans don't have time to eat fruit. Just immediately say the first thing that pops in your mind. Do not process that there might be an issue here. Just go, we don't have time to eat fruit. Logic. Chicagoans only have time to eat donuts, it seems. Well, it's much quicker and there's more profit for the businesses. Think about that GDP. It's more processed too. It's literally like this image of the Google fridges, but with the donuts and 2,000 calorie crumble cookies on display. And well, the bottom shelf's actually empty in this one. There aren't any healthy options because you have to bring those from home. Come on, guy. It's a skill issue. I will say, there are places, obviously, you can get fruit within Chicago city center. It genuinely could have been a bit of bad luck that my 30-minute walk just happened to not come across a single place selling one. Crazy bad luck, yes, but also because there weren't as many as I was expecting. But I did have many viewers point out that if I'd merely left the city center, crossed a bridge, and walked a very short few blocks, I could have easily found a place that sold fruit. Which was my point. The video was an expression of reverse culture shock. I was returning to the US after having spent significant time living in London and traveling all around Europe. I had grown accustomed to certain practices over here. Like, you know when Americans complain that, oh, there's no water fountains in Europe, you can't even drink some water. You're not wrong, right? That is something you've noticed that could be improved. That's like genuinely, this isn't just the American bias in me going, yeah, where are the water fountains? Seriously, there's not as many water fountains, and having more easily accessible water is genuinely a good thing. And that is one great thing about America, I will say. And that's something that you can notice when you visit another country. Oh, why why don't they have water? It's fun, isn't it? For me, when I visited Europe, I was like, oh, I could just easily eat healthy and it's not difficult to do. Listen, if I went back to my hometown of Jersey, I wouldn't expect to find fruits or vegetables on every street corner. Not at all. In my part of New Jersey, like most of the states, thanks to the zoning laws, the residential area where I lived legally could not have any shops nearby selling fruits or anything that people would actually want to buy. And instead, these shops need to be relegated to a giant warehouse-sized store with a giant parking lot a far drive away so that nothing is ever nearby, no matter where you are. That's how the current model runs in most of the USA. For that sort of model, the grocery store system sort of makes sense, right? I grew up in a suburb and later a very rural area, and that's just what works at the moment. But Chicago is not suburban. It is also not rural. Chicago is a massive city, one of the US's biggest. It's also fairly walkable and has not too bad public transport, in my opinion. So I expected Chicago to be more like an actual city than a suburb when it came to basic life admin like popping to a local shop or easily buying fruit. Turns out, I was stupid to think that, and instead, I must adapt to the clearly superior system of finding healthy food as recommended in the comments. If you're ever looking for fruit in Chicago, I got some of the meta from the commenters. So 1, don't expect to find it. 2, ask your hotel concierge or a local, or maybe just try and find some on Google, because a lot of people there treat fruit as the same as a bag of flour, and they can't quite see the irony in that. And I know there's some Brits in my comments getting real cocky right now, being like, hee hee hee. No. Don't get too cocky here, because listen, sometimes you all suffer from the same issue of misunderstanding the meaning of ubiquity. Everyone does. Like I said, normalcy bias is a very standard thing. The difference is, when I said I couldn't find fruit in Chicago, I was told I wasn't looking in the right places, which was exactly my point. You should not have to. Now, when I said that soft serve ice cream in the UK is pretty bad compared to the US and nearly always a Mr. Whippy, I was chastised by many Brits telling me, not all ice cream here is bad, you just don't know where to go. Have you gone to Devon? Have you gone to my local ice cream shop? There's really great ice cream if you know where to go. Yeah. That again was my point. As a standard, soft serve ice cream in the UK is really, really bad. I'm sorry, there's no arguing here. Change your food laws if you want that to change, but you can't point out outliers as a counter. I grew up with great ice cream in New Jersey. It's a night and day difference. I even made a whole video detailing how the UK law reduced protections on good ice cream, leading us down this path we're on now, where many ice creams here replaced all the nice milk fats with vegetable oils, where in the US they protected the term ice cream, and so that product is exponentially better. So yes, fruit might be harder to find in Chicago, but oh my God, it has some great ice cream and frozen custard. They're out of this world and at a caliber you couldn't even find in the fanciest ice cream shop here, okay? If you want to see my ice cream video, by the way, I will link that above. But regardless, humans are complex, but also quite simple. The thing is, we all have a strong bias towards what is and what we're currently familiar with. We all default to what we know. That is just very natural. The problem is when new information arrives, and instead of sitting with it and thinking about it, we immediately reach for any reason that it must be wrong. Because if it's wrong, nothing has to change. Having no fruit isn't a failure of the city. It's just how cities work, from my limited experience. Bad ice cream isn't a failure of the industry. It just, you just haven't found a good one yet. And honestly, if you've never had to question something that you've never thought about, why would you, right? You've got a lot going on. Saying a sidewalk would be useful doesn't mean every journey has to be done on foot. It just means you've walked somewhere before where you didn't have to constantly check over your shoulder to make sure an oversized vehicle wasn't going to hit you at 50 miles an hour. And once you've felt that difference, it becomes really hard not to notice when it's missing. But you don't know what you don't know. And the more you get a chance to travel outside your current system, the more you begin to notice these tiny ways that life can be improved. It's difficult to ever find these improvements if we can't ever admit that something can be improved in the first place. I just think it's so much more hopeful of a message to be like, why accept the way things are? Why make excuses for the way things are when you can just learn something and then improve your quality of life? But hey, at least the US has way better ice cream and frozen custard. Am I right? I am right, all right? I've made a video about it. You can click to watch that above. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hopefully I'll see you on my channel next Sunday. It's like a bag of flour.